teenage dreams so hard to beat.
It was famously John Peel's favourite record of all time. 2.5 minutes of surging pop punk, 2 fingers held up to parents, teachers and anyone else over the age of 20.
I wanna hold her tight. Get teenage kicks right through the night. I'm gonna call her.
The Undertones classic is a charged anthem from a different time, one before freedom of movement across Europe. Older, wiser, the band's former lead singer's memories of that time are not all rosy.
I wanna hold her tight. Get teenage kicks right through the night.
I actually do come from a generation, and I physically have watched road crew on their hands and knees at the back of a stage after a gig, picking up broken drumsticks and curling up guitar strings into little packets. Because the rules were, if you said on the paperwork you took 400 drumsticks out of the country, you better bring back 400 drumsticks, even if they're all broken. I have personally stood and watched our road crew steaming with fury, whilst some belligerent bureaucrat made them unload a 40-foot Arctic trailer simply to count the number of speakers. Do we really want to go back to that?
The end of freedom of movement threatened by Brexit is, along with intellectual property, the key concern of many working in the UK's creative industries.
We are phenomenally good at this thing about being creative. And that includes writing songs, making music, performing, making movies, creating games and software and doing all kinds of things. Brexit has an enormous danger to actually dismantle one of the most successful industries in this country and indeed the world.
And so the industry is on manoeuvres, striking a rather discordant note. There haven't been terribly many high-profile rock and rollers singing Brexit's praises. Are there closet Brexiteers out there in the creative industries?
Well, we did a survey recently of musicians and composers and a whole bunch of people in the industry, and we found that only 2% felt that Brexit would be a positive from their point of view. I have to tell you that we've not yet found those 2%, and if you find them before us, please let us know. More than 50%, as you would imagine, said that they were hugely concerned that Brexit would have a negative impact, and I think that does reflect some of these challenges and fears that people have about how difficult it will be once Britain leaves the EU.
Like many other areas of the UK economy, it's clarity as to transition, as to our end trading relationship that the music business is demanding. Is there a time pressure on the situation as regards to the creative industries? I mean, when do you need to know?
Well, we're a year away, and I suppose we're still none the wiser. Really, Brexit is probably the most high-profile, public and complex game of multi-dimensional chess that we've seen. It's a very public negotiation. We've just got to ensure that the music industry makes its voice loud and clear in terms of the impact that Brexit could have, and that's one that we'll continue to do.
And of course, it's not Ed or Adele or any other musician identifiable by their first name that has most to lose from Brexit. It's those who make a living gig to gig, not at Wembley, but in smaller venues like the JW3 Community Centre. Emily Barker is a singer-songwriter recently returned from a month-long tour in Europe.
I'm very concerned about how expensive visas would potentially be for each territory, as well as the bureaucracy involved and how long it would take. So I recently got my first US working visa, and it cost me a fortune, a small fortune, and it was relatively late notice, the tour that I was offered. So I had to pay for a fast-track visa, which was an additional huge sum of money, and then there was no guarantee that I would get it. So that really concerns me, how much time it would take to put visas together for one-off opportunities which often come up, such as festivals, where you go over and you do one show and then you fly back.
But do you think this government and previous governments, do you think they recognise just how important the creative industries are to our economy?
I think often not enough, and I think music accounts for such a huge British export, and it's so important. So I think that they should value it more.
I will be singing peace in the valley.
Despite British artists literally providing the soundtrack to our lives, you'd be forgiven for thinking the music industry wasn't as great a priority in these Brexit negotiations as farming, fisheries policy, the Northern Irish border. Yet what could be more powerful than a musician with a grievance? It is perhaps almost as surprising as the sight of a middle-aged bloke in a suit at a gig, but the scale of the contribution to our economy made by the creative industries truly is extraordinary. In 2016, £9 million were generated every hour. That's £84 billion in just 1 year. And of course, musicians don't tend to have problems when it comes to making themselves heard. And certainly the industry is hopeful that their concerns are being listened to. One of the true UK success stories, growing year after year despite these straitened financial times. When their Brexit song is written, will Britain's musicians be chopping out the power chords or end up singing the blues?